Okay, welcome back. We're on page 137 talking about DNS. So I mentioned that we have to have a special DNS that adds an extra field into the database. So when I ask for kumquat.com, it's going to reply with the IP address, and I can use this very same DNS request, not asking for an IP, but asking for who is my domain controller. So they add a new guy. An Active Directory adds a new field into the DNS system, and since your internet service provider is not going to do that for you, we're going to have to do our own. Now, I don't want to have to build an honest-to-God full DNS server running on my machine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cheat. My DNS server that I'm going to set up is going to have this extra field, and then it's going to basically abdicate its throne after that and say, anytime you do a lookup, I'm going to send you off to, in my case, send me off to Spectrum to actually fulfill the request. Okay, so I'm not like building a full-blown DNS that updates from the internet. That would be wasteful. It only does the DNS for the internal network, and everything outside the network uses the normal DNS controller that you've been using since day one. Okay, so it only does my Active Directory stuff and all my machines. Okay, because I would not expect, by the way, I would not expect that the outside world to be able to find a machine inside my LAN. Like right now, before I have a domain controller, I just have work group. No, right? The outside world doesn't know that. So we're going to have our own little DNS server that handles our stuff plus this extra field. But other than that, we're going to abdicate and move on. Okay. Now, you can use host and LMHosts files. This way, you could go in and hard code some things. Now, most people don't do that. First of all, it's a maintenance nightmare because every machine would have to have its own host file that had special things in it. Now, I know people that do this for nefarious reasons, okay? So, for example, let's say you're addicted to porn. I mean, this is a horrible example, but just bear with me. And you don't want the DNS server at Spectrum to notice that you're typing in, flatbottomgirls.com or whatever. So you go do that one time, and you write down the IP address, and then you go and build a host file with the IP address. So now you can type in your porn site, and no one could tell that you went to a DNS server to take that URL. Okay, that's a horrible example. I probably should have come up with a better one. But again, I would have to replicate that host file on all the machines. I mean, there is a way you can replicate files using Active Directory, but for God's sake, this is a stupid idea. Okay. So I just want to go there just to show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go to the location where this is, where your host file would be. Okay, so I'm going to go to C, and I'm going to go to Windows. I'm going to go to System 32. There's one called etc. Drivers. And then etc. So this is where the host file is. Let's just go see what's in here. Do it open with Notepad. And it's basically just comments out, right? So all I would have to do if I wanted to do this is like this is the example. You would just type in the IP address, a tab, and then the name of the thing you're going to. And that way it will never ever go to DNS. It'll go to this thing first. And so the order of this is I do host first, and then if I can't find it in host, I'll go to DNS. Okay. There's another one in here that's called LM. That's the old style. This is the LAN manager. That's like you can still do this if you're using a work group. All right, we don't have a work group anymore. We've converted over to a domain, so that we don't need that one anymore. Okay, so yes, you could do this. What about so prior to Windows 2000, you could, or PCs that were into work group, you had this basically thing that's called NetBIOS name, and so it's kind of ancient now. We still use it because sure enough, there's going to be some software that's going to expect, the old style NetBIOS name, but it's out there. So host name, page 140, the name assigned to our device, like, server 1 or whatever, okay? And so to maintain compatibility with NetBIOS, the name can't exceed 15 characters. So we go in here and we create our new guy, and we tell it what our service name is, it's going to shorten it. Well, it could. So the real Active Directory name could be, workstation for Dan, room 48. But when the NetBIOS thing, it's going to come up with workstation You know, you have to go in there and kind of tweak it. Most of the time, it's not an issue because 15 characters is typically all I'd want to call a name, anything anyway. So DNS zones. So there's 3 zones to a DNS server. A primary zone, which is the one that basically says this is my DNS database. A secondary zone, which is kind of sort of like a backup in case the first one fails, or not really fails. What happens is the replication gets messed up, or it's in the middle of replication, cleaning itself up, deleting old entries, adding new entries. So during the time it's doing that, it's going to switch over to the secondary zone. Okay, and then a stub zone, and we're going to use stub zone, not that we're going to physically do this. The machine's going to do it for us. Stub zone basically says, screw it, I want to use somebody else's. So primary is the stuff that's going to be inside our domain. Secondary is like a backup copy, and the stub domain says, look, I don't want to do DNS, so I'm just going to point my DNS server to you guys. It's like a shortcut that points to other people's DNSs. Authoritative DNS. Now, this is an interesting term. Some DNS controllers, if some third party is telling me that's the name of this machine, that's not quite the same as I'm going to that domain and it tells me that this is the name of the machine. So an authoritative DNS is the one that lives in your system because it's the real one. You could go the web server, for example. I have an honest to God real domain name for that web server, okay? But I'm probably going to have to contact my internet service provider and tell them I want you to add an entry to your DNS so people can get to my web server. That's a non-authoritative one. Okay, good. And we could. I'm going to go ahead and pretend. I'm going to go here to the start menu and go to Windows Administrative Tools. I'm not sure I want to do that. We'd have to have all the tools installed. We don't really actually have them all yet. But what I was planning on doing is going down here to Windows Administrative Tools and then going here and say I want to mess with DNS. But I don't have the DNS role installed, so doggone it. Okay, cool. Well, we will soon, though. What it was basically in the book, it talks about this stuff. How you can go in and see those zones. WINS. This is an old one. This is the... What on earth does WINS stand for? Huh, I don't know. Let me go check it out. Old style WINS. It's an acronym for something. Windows Internet Name Service, WINS. Now this is ancient. This is back in the days before Active Directory, really. And it uses peer-to-peer naming. Now we still kind of sort of use this because when you fire up a machine and it says, who am I? It goes to a DHCP server, and the DHCP points to everything to include the DNS. And the DNS says, aha, I see you went to your DHCP. I'm going to add you as an item that's now approachable into the system. In other words, this maintains a list of all the computers that are currently turned on and working. Okay, it WINS. The domain has all computers, whether they're turned off or not. WINS basically says, here's the things we can get to. Okay, now typically this was peer-to-peer, but they just stole the capability of that to add this to the DNS. Okay, so every time you log in, Active Directory says, aha, I see you there. Okay, it maps the net BIOS name to an IP address. And most likely, I really can't imagine any software still using this. But hey, I'm sure Microsoft has turned it off to see what breaks and said, screw it. It's harmless, so let's leave it on. That kind of thing. And then Universal Naming Convention, page 143. So how do you refer to something across the network? So I'm going to pretend, okay, this is not going to work, but I'm going to pretend. I'm going to do a / and the name of a service. I'm going to call it a file server. And then underneath that file server, I want some sort of accounting share, okay? Account share. Now, that's how it's done. It's / the machine name, and then the name of the shared folder. Okay, that's how this works. So in our case, later on when we're going to we're going to add a PC into our domain in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to have to be able to go back to server 1 using this technique. Okay, understanding organizational users and containers, page 143. Okay, organizational units are just logical groupings of machines and users that I want to apply a consistent policy. Now, if every machine in your entire system was completely ubiquitous and everyone got the exact same thing, same policy, same software everywhere, maybe you don't even need an organizational unit. But it makes sense to do it for several reasons. One is, I'm treating this organization differently. These machines get a different piece of software. That would be a really good reason to create an organizational unit. And the other one is to delegate authority. For example, these users in this organizational unit have the ability to do something that other people can't. So those are the two major reasons for creating, is I want to treat things differently and I want to delegate authority. Okay, cool. Those are the two users. So I can get a group of users and computers and put them in a separate use. Like, let's say the engineering folks, because they need a different configuration. Okay, they need a lot, maybe different permissions, maybe different, software, those kinds of things. Anyway, all this can be done with just using this thing called this group policy. We're going to do this, just hang on. But create a brand new group policy, a GPO. A group policy object means I attach settings to this thing called a group policy object, and I attach that to an organizational unit. So all the machines or all the users get a slightly different tweak than all the rest of the organization. You can have a gazillion organizational units. Most people do. Like, clearly the settings for servers is going to be different than the settings for an ordinary PC. So I'm expecting 2 right there, right off the bat. Maybe more. And under the PCs, maybe the salespeople need something different, and the engineering people, number 7. So it's okay to have lots of organizational units. Okay. So we can't do this, but we can look at the example here they have in the thing. Oh, okay. I guess we can't. All right. Well, I just have to wait then. Doggone it. Okay. Anyway, it's in the Active Directory users to computers, which we haven't gotten, so don't have that. So there's also a thing called a default container. If you just randomly create a new account on our new computer, it's going to throw it into this thing called computers. Now, typically, that container typically don't have any group policy objects associated with it. It's a holding tank. Okay, I create a bunch of, let's say I create 15 new computers because I got a shipment of computers in. So I just put them in there. I haven't figured out where they're going yet. Like, this one's going to accounting, and then I'll grab it and put it in that OU for accounting. This one's going to engineering. So it's just a holding ground, and we don't typically apply policies there. There's just a playground for putting stuff before you decide where you're going to put it for real. So they come up with a whole bunch of these built-in guys. I mean, some are real organizations, some are just really containers. And so the only real difference is I can manage an organizational unit, but I can't manage a container. And that's on purpose, right? They don't want you to use the default thing for doing adding, delegating, and adding software. Okay, so when you first add a computer, it probably goes to that container, and you're going to have to move it. I'm going to skip the thing about hidden containers and default containers. Those are kind of boring. So delegating control, page 146. This is a very good, of the two reasons. One is that I need to treat these users or computers differently. They get more or less. But the other one is I can delegate authority. Maybe I got some junior IT guy. I got some guy in the engineering department who maybe he's done this before in a previous job, right? That'd be cool. And so I don't want to give him full control over everybody's machine, but maybe I could give him control over the machines in the engineering division, and he could help out when the engineer says, "Hey, I'm having trouble here. Could you help me?" Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. You guys know how this works.